Hello and welcome to 5 in 5. Today I'm talking about Kiss of the Vampire, and this is a set text for any A-level media students studying with the Eduqas board. So the first thing I'm going to mention is this little bit of copy at the bottom of the poster which says Hammer Film Production. Now, even though this doesn't take up much space on the poster, it would have had a big influence on audiences because the British-run Hammer Production Studios were really popular. They have a long history, and by the time this film was released in 1963, people would already have known what to expect from a Hammer horror film. In particular, they would have been shocking, there would have been loads of blood, there would have been fairly skimpy costumes for women, and great performances from people like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Now, if you look in Hammer horror history, you'll see that vampire films feature quite heavily, and Kiss of the Vampire came off the back of two previous Dracula films, which had done really well. Part of the reason why Hammer films did so well at this time was because of the partnerships they had with various American distribution companies, so we can see the Universal logo here. Hammer still produce horror films today, so you might have seen The Woman in Black or Let Me In, but their history has been up and down, with some of their films in the 70s being particularly criticised for things like silly plots and being quite sexually explicit. However, even today, Hammer remains popular. You'll find all sorts of fan responses online, including podcasts and YouTube videos. And so this tiny little bit of information on the poster, as I say, is working very hard to bring the audience in. My second point is about the rest of the text at the bottom of the poster, and you'll notice here that neither Peter Cushing nor Christopher Lee star in this film, and that's a huge disappointment to a lot of fans. Despite this, many of the names listed in the billing block had already appeared in Hammer horror films. For example, Clifford Evans had starred in the popular Curse of the Werewolf. So, as is conventional with any film posters, the stars do attract the audience. One of the things that the exam board points out is the listing of the actors in the billing block, and how at this point in history they're listed in an order of importance and particularly how much they get paid. So notice here that this is very male dominated and the only female comes quite low down the list. So the third thing I want to point out is this little logo for Eastman Colour. So this bit of text again is quite small on the poster, but it's still very attractive to audiences. Now what we need to remember is that at this time, 1963, not all films were in colour. We still had some black and white films and some directors choosing to keep their films in black and white. Colour film was still quite expensive, and so not everyone had made the shift. Now, Eastman Colour was a slightly cheaper film stock, which meant that it was more affordable, and so Hammer was able to make that shift to colour films. And of course, colour films work particularly well for the horror genre because you can really see the gore, the blood, and all those things that we want in a horror film. Now, it's said that Eastman Colour was particularly good at showing those reds, and so the production company would often add extra red into the scenes, painting berries or flowers with red just to give that extra vivid idea of the genre. Colour was also used to help to tell the story, so often greens, for example, were used to create sort of dreamscapes and kind of moody moments. Now, one of the rumours is that Hammer used to send their films to their censors in black and white. So the censors at the BBFC would see the film in black and white, and the idea was that maybe some of the scenes wouldn't be quite so shocking because they didn't have colour. But actually what this did was cause more concern, as the censors were kind of imagining what certain scenes would look like in colour. Of course, submitting your film in black and white though was also cheaper, so there were practical issues as well. So for my fourth point, we're finally starting to look at some of the images on the poster, and here I just want to talk about Gothic iconography and sort of horror iconography. We've got that Gothic lettering, which is reminiscent of two things: a stake through the heart, the weapon that's used to kill vampires, but we've also got a sense of the vampire fang, and if we think about vampires throughout history, the fangs are particularly important and part of that iconography. We've also got a castle right in the background, we've got the full moon, and we've got these huge bats attacking our characters. So all of these are clear indications of what the genre is. They demonstrate Steve Neal's idea of repetition in genre, and of course a lot of the Hammer films did repeat the generic conventions because they had already been successful and they knew that there was an audience there for horror. So my final point is about gender representation, and we need to remember that historically this is quite a good time for women. They've got more freedom outside of the home, the contraceptive pill becomes available, and we've got various feminist movements going on. So we perhaps see that a little bit reflected on the poster, in that we've got one woman who's particularly strong and powerful looking, but we've also got a weaker woman who is being held up as she seems to have fallen into some kind of swoon. The one thing we might notice though is that both our females have got very similar costumes, very light coloured costumes, and quite skimpy costumes as well. And as I said before, this is quite typical of Hammer. The title Kiss of the Vampire also suggests that one of these women at least is a bit of a seductress, and we've got that idea of the women being presented for the male gaze. So it's a bit of a mixed representation of gender. It's the same for the male characters as well. We could argue that it's male characters that are most powerful just because they're higher up on the poster. So there's plenty there to discuss in terms of gender representation and to think about our various theories that we might apply.